to another Train Sim World 3 roadmap update video. This is for the last roadmap of 2022, being on the 8th of December 2022. So it's quite a big roadmap. I mean, it's a very big roadmap. The too long didn't read summary, so pretty much if you want to get everything out of the way and go quick. So a quick summary for those who don't want to go through the whole article, though why you wouldn't, we don't know. There are copious festive puns. There are more details on all these points within the roadmap. So the Holiday Express Runaway Elf add-on releases next Tuesday, December the 13th. I have done a separate video on that. Find out how some of the assets we've made will help route building in future. New US themed route expansion pack added to roadmap, and new UK themed route expansion added to the roadmap that's been developed by Rivet Games. Not really sure what it means by route expansion pack. Does that mean an extension? I mean, when they say route expansion, it does sound like, well, you know, say there's going to be an extra 10 miles or something to a route, or is that meaning a new train or something? What does it mean by route expansion? I suppose we'll probably get into that. We've made good progress identifying Dispatcher Pathfinder improvements both within the core game and our American routes, and Add-ons Manager will not release this side of Christmas. No. There's more. A post-release Bremen Oldenburg patch is on the way, which I believe is for Steam, and I should also make a separate video for that. And the Class 20 and HST livery designer functionality are development complete and ready to go into testing. So let's see, let's have a look. So the roadmap, ho ho ho, welcome to December's roadmap. Just as Santa is preparing his goodies for all the good boys and girls, so have we added a couple of presents to the list. And we've checked it twice, they're both on the nice list, in the form of 2 expansion packs, which will be making their way to you in the new year. More to come on those in the coming roadmap. So, speaking of stocking fillers, we have a festive surprise coming for you next week. We are beside our elves with anticipation for the all-new Holiday Express Runaway Elf, announced earlier today. In this month's roadmap, we talk about how some of the unique features of this smaller-than-life route might help our route building in future. Bahnstrecke Bremen to Oldenburg released earlier this week, and we have details on a post-release patch. As well as this, we have news on the Add-ons Manager, Dispatcher, Pathfinder improvements, patch news, and our trip to Wali in November, which we probably won't go through as that's something a bit different. And finally, before we get into the nitty-gritty, a little challenge for you all. Can you see how many terrible festive puns JD Santa has hidden in the roadmap? And you'll be sorry if you missed any, like Yule log. Answers at the bottom. So this is our final roadmap of 2022, with the first roadmap of the new year on Thursday, January the 12th. So almost midway through January. So that just leaves us to say we hope you have all had a wonderful festive period with your loved ones, and we'll be back with 3,000 plus word essays in 2023. Not saying all of this text is surely a clause for celebration, Santa Claus at least. So Train Sim 3 core improvements, a progress summary on core improvements the teams are working on. So Add-ons Manager. Testing has started on the Train Sim World 3 version of Add-ons Manager, so that's to stop the 64GB limit on PlayStation. Thanks, Sony. We want to get it into your hands as quickly as we can, but also as safely as we can. This connects with the entire back-end infrastructure of loading add-ons, so we have to ensure the disruptions to your play is minimal when it launches. It has taken longer than what we have wanted, and this is due to a number of factors. We are now happy with the system in place in Train Sim World 2's version, and that infrastructure has been used to build the Train Sim World 3 version. The team remain committed to getting it into your hands as soon as we can, as we know PS5 players like myself are playing add-on Tetris at the moment and aren't able to get the full experience we want you to have. Again, thanks Sony. It's also worth bearing in mind that these changes will also likely have a small positive impact on crashing and performance, particularly with Gen 8 consoles. At this stage, we are prioritising the most impacted players and want to get the system out to them first, so PlayStation 5. We won't provide a release date though until testing is complete, but we're on the final stages towards getting it into your hands. Right, red lights, dispatcher improvements. We've been working on the core technology around our dispatcher and focusing on the pathfinding our AI trains do, particularly when in mid-service upon loading into a route. We found that in some instances the AI trains took an unexpected path which caused various issues including pile-ups, phantom red lights, etc. In positive news though, we believe we have a fix for the issue which is ready to go into testing. This should, when released, resolve a lot of instances of red lights in the game blocking progress. So a bit like on the Brighton main line, sometimes you can get stuck because, well, there's red lights which stay there for hours. The exception to this fix is American routes, which have a slightly different issue. This issue stems from multiple trains starting their service in the same signal session, meaning some end up out of order and causing issues. This improvement is currently being investigated. And the patch notes highlights, and of course there's another pun here, but wait, here's Murph. So obviously for more. Here's a quick selection of some of the larger patch notes we've released in the past month so you don't miss them. So micro stuttering improvements, double stock lights will no longer massively impact performance, initial lag when loading into a route and rotating the camera removed, save game is now enabled by default, and series of post-release Birmingham Cross City improvements. Players can use similar non-ascented characters to search for unascented characters. Sort mode preferences are preserved between play sessions. Small performance improvements during rain, and make it rain dear. Improvements to trains and carriages popping in on consoles. Bremen Oldenburg post-released improvements. And for Train Sim World 2, improvements to Add-on Manager. And highlights of yesterday's patch notes, which we will actually do a separate video of that. So we can skip ahead there. Let's see. Quick note on some areas of the roadmap we don't have a substantial update for you on this time around, but wanted to provide a quick summary as to where they are in development. So, the Class 20 livery designer compatibility is complete, it's just awaiting testing window. HST livery designer development is complete and they're just awaiting testing. And that's going to be expected after the Class 20. Spirit of Steam physics improvement, we expect these to launch in January. Spirit of Steam AI SPADs, these are currently being investigated. We believe we know the source of the issue. Incompletable achievements still under investigation. Performance improvements, continued incremental improvements coming in patches. Derailing improvements, the second of the 3 improvements that focuses on harsh braking, is currently development complete and awaiting testing. And the third improvement related to couplers will be reviewed after the second is out. And the TSW2 preservation crew releases in a queue for an appropriate build. Special projects team update. Well, let's call it the preservation crew. The team have been working hard building our Holiday Express, as well as making some festive mastery touches to the training centre, available after completing tasks within the add-ons, probably Christmas trees, Christmas lights. But as mentioned in a previous section, the livery designer compatibility for the 20 and HST are what we call dev complete, and awaiting their first pass from our QA team. The team have also investigated what is involved in upgrading some Train Sim World compatible routes with trains. Oh, that sounds good. That's actually very good to hear. So, Brighton Mainline, that can be first on the list. Third-party development partner program update. So the only partner program addition to the roadmap this month is a new expansion pack for a UK route, also being developed by our friends at Rivet Games. We expect this to release soon after the route, also currently on the roadmap. So pretty much I'm guessing they're going to release their UK route, and then they're going to release a UK expansion pack. I still don't get it. Is the expansion pack a route expansion, or like extra trains? I haven't really got my head around that yet. Is it an extension, route expansion? When you sort of hear that, you think, oh, maybe they got another 10-20 miles to the route. What is it? Or is it just call it a Loco DLC or something like? What is it? With the Train Sim Germany team supporting the release of Bremen Oldenburg and working on their first standalone route for Train Sim World 3, progress on the DBBR 420 has stalled, and we thank them for their ongoing support as we look to continue to upgrade the quality of our new German routes. And everything else is as you were. The teams are getting their heads down, and when we have more information to share, we'll let you know. I wonder what's actually happening with Skyhook Games, because they're incredibly quiet. The last release I think was Horseshoe Curve, or at least maybe the 187 improvements. So are they still working on the game, or have they sort of been like, nah, not for us, and they're doing the lawn mowing? I don't know. Inside development, Holiday Express trains, escalators, and lifts. Our next release comes next week, and is no joke. Christmas is under threat from a mysterious elf, and it's your job to stop him with the help of your Richie Rails F7. We chatted to one of our artists, Adam, to talk about how he curated some of the new assets built, namely escalators and lifts and elevators for the route, which will help with future content. Wait, elevators in? Okay. You'll have to find out for yourselves where we use them. Take it away, Adam. Both technologies were developed as study and self-development projects to learn a little more about Unreal Engine 4's blueprints and how far we can push artist tools without being an engineer and only using the most surface layer of programming, the node system. Escalators came first as they didn't have the added complexity of having buttons and being player operated or knowing where they are at any given time, which an elevator cabin needs to. We started the project by establishing what we wanted the artist to have available, as well as what the tool requires of the artist. This needed to be balanced between complete freedom over all aspects of the blueprint and actual usability, and not being buried under a pile of different values needing to be set up. The second consideration was the minimum usability requirements. As train stations don't necessarily follow a rigid grid of units, the tool needed to provide flexibility of specifying the exact height and length of the rise between floors. With that in mind, we have blocked out the main modular pieces. There are only 3, which is very artist friendly in terms of modelling and texturing, and would need to be done. Modularity also meant that we were stuck with static meshes, so traditional animation was mostly ruled out. With these established, we took to reverse engineering, exiting spline technology. We used replacement of repeating geometry like walls and fences and adapted it to a more precise but simpler system that allowed the construction of an escalator based on the previous assumptions of simplified controls. In the end, the construction script grew quite considerably, and this is the final version that contains some additional logic for player movement, automatic size detection, etc. These are all fairly simple concepts, but were challenging enough at my level of knowledge of blueprints. You can see the little images there going through. The final control panel for the blueprint has only the most necessary controls, most of which can be left at default, and the artist is usually just left with assessing the length, height and direction of the escalator. The message can also be changed out on the fly to test out different styles. You can see another image. The final result was a block-out version that had basic functionality of being placed in the level. There's even a travelator there as well. Fit to required to scale. As a side bonus, they could be flattened altogether to create travelators. Cool. This is where the project hit a little snag and required some research. It turns out that animating steps in an efficient way is not most trivial. Some brainstorming with Tom, one of our technical designers, helped me greatly to come up with a very efficient way of rendering a huge number of steps and getting them to move along the custom angle of any given escalator. In essence, each step is an instance of the same step, meaning that the game just sees it as one object and does not need a lot of resources to render it. These instances are then distributed along the spleen that creates the steps in 2 forms, resting and moved. I have then added a simple blend between the 2 locations, which meant steps would slowly move up and forward by 1 position and then blink back to their original position to start the movement again. This creates a seamless animation and an illusion of movement. Think of it as stairs equivalent of spinning striped signs at a barber shop. The final setup for this was actually quite simple, and that doesn't look simple, but it probably is to them. Last but not least, player movement. Since the game is seeing the whole array of steps as just one thing and movement is an illusion, physics just won't work. This is where I was stuck perhaps the longest, and after much deliberation on the viability of different approaches, I have decided that just like with all of the other steps of this project, the simplest solution would be best. I have opted for adding a volume that is automatically generated for the length of the staircase, and once it detects the player inside, it simply starts adding an invisible push force in the direction the escalator is going. Synchronizing it with the speed of steps was a little more math than I would have liked, but in the end it's quite a convincing effect, and you can still run up or down, albeit very slowly, against the stairs if you choose to, which would not be possible with a typical animation or snap-to-snap method. Last step was preparing some more appropriate geometry and textures that would represent final resolutions so that the escalator can be tested with realistic overheads. And you can see someone on there as well. The solutions employed in the tool have proven both usable and light enough to have multiple escalators at any given location. While there is still plenty to address that I would love to explore in the future, this is a solid first step and a good basis to work from and improve with time. And lift development. So now that I had the modularity and utility of the tool outlined, I've decided to add a layer of complexity and adapt it to a lift tool. I have reused the same spline logic to create the main lift structure. This allowed for the lift to be modular with different style options just like the escalator, as well as to be tuned to the exact height needed. As a lift has much more movable parts, however, it required a few more pieces to assemble. Early blockout meshes were narrowed down to the following. The data of the bottom and top locations of the lift were also used to add. So probably we're going to see working elevators, which is quite cool. These were designed to let me clearly see the orientation and state of all the moving pieces as the script puts them together, and only roughly represent the actual sizes and proportions. I have decided that for the optimal amount of flexibility and art direction the modules would be, left to right, entrance mesh for top bottom, entrance walls doors, main shaft mesh, cabin and outside, button panels and cabin doors. From here it was more of an iteration on similar spline logic to make sure all pieces spawned in the correct position and relation to each other, and it followed the same principles as the escalator but with more variables and parts needed to align. While time consuming, this process was fairly simple, and the final construction script ended up being quite large but happens offline, so gameplay performance is not affected. And the most important part here was making sure that as long as pieces are aligned correctly in your 3D software, the size and proportions are irrelevant, as the blueprint would read them and adjust accordingly. The result of first draft of the construction script, which you can see just there. The parameters, like that artists would have available, was similar to the escalator tool, but expanded to the account for more modularity and lift meshes. To aid performance, a cold distance was also added to interior meshes that would not normally be visible unless up close. The next step was to get the lift moving. This was far less trivial than expected, as the whole blueprint needs to track where the lift is and performed several timed actions based on its position. Move the cabin up or down depending on which panel is used and where the cabin is currently resting. Animate the doors on the cabin door, animate the upper and lower doors on the exterior structure, and adjust the button function to appropriately cool the cabin up and down. Considering the lift Holiday Express works only on 2 floors and moves only between 2 points of spline that it's based on, I've opted for a slightly complicated if-then logic, where all components respond to the relative location of the cabin along the length of the spline. This approach would only realistically work for this scenario. A setup with more floors and floor selection would become too complicated for this approach, and would most likely require a much more complicated approach both in coding and implementation, and the final logic grew considerably, so subparts and animations were collapsed to their own functions for more clarity on what happens in each scenario. Once the prototype worked, I once again created a more representative geometry. Placeholder texture was no longer necessary, as it would be similar to existing assets, which we know is acceptable. In the final version, I wanted to accommodate a glass and steel design that would allow the player to see the interior, so a roof mesh was added to hide potential engine chassis, as well as animated cable that connected to the cabin, which is quite cool, you can see on there. The final result worked to specifications and allowed for a granular height adjustments, with the blueprint building the structure and setting animations in the background. And we hope you enjoyed a little insight into the world of development. Our aim with each project is to ensure that skills learnt, tools used and assets created will benefit the future projects, and here is a great example of it doing so, and you can check out these in action from next Tuesday's release. So, also in other Holiday Express news, some eagle-eyed forumers have noticed a small change to the controls menu which came in a recent update. All we're saying at this stage is there might be a mastery reward you'd be interested in, and we wanted a sports car, but apparently that made no franking sense. So, and finally, and yes, it's going on to the Model Railway exhibition, which was at the Birmingham NEC. So you probably can't see the things on screen at the moment, but yeah, they had a few images of them at the Model Railway exhibition, very nice. But yes, the Trenton World Roadmap, so Dovetail Games releases, Holiday Express, US Route, US Loco, and Route Expansion Pack for the US. But what does it mean by Route Expansion Pack? And partner program releases. So you've got a UK route by Rivet Games, route expansion pack from Rivet Games. It needs to be more. Yes, I mean expansion could mean an extra 10 miles. It could mean quite a lot of things. So yeah, a German route by TSG and the DBBR 420. Core features, add-ons manager, derating improvements, red light dispatcher improvements, save game improvements, and performance optimization. Missionless projects that players will notice but don't fall into one of the categories. Rush hour passengers for London Computer and Spirit of Steam manual farmer functionality. And yeah, the special projects team are working on the Class 20 livery designer, HST livery designer, the DBBR 187 audio improvements, a tiny update for the Cathcart Circle and Train Sim World 2. All of these are now Train Sim World 2, Hamburg Lübeck, small update, Rheinland Austin medium, Bakerloo Timetable 2022, Long Island Railroad, Peninsula Corridor, and Oakville Subdivision, and LGV Mediterranean. Yeah, that is the roadmap. Which, yeah, was obviously quite a long roadmap. How long did that take to actually do that? How do I see? Too long. But yes, that is going to be it from me. What do you think? Do comment below. Links can be found in the usual places to the Discord, PayPal, merch store. Apart from that, thanks for coming in, and I hope to see you next time. See you all. Take care. Bye, guys.